Birds are some of the most fascinating creatures on the planet. Out of all the animals on the planet, birds are the ones that rule the skies. They're also so diverse, with thousands of species soaring through the world. From tiny swifts zipping through the air, to giant condors riding through the wind. These birds come in all sorts of shapes, colors, and sizes. And not only are birds beautiful, but they're also an integral part of our environment and act as predators, prey, pollinators, bioindicators, and gardeners of nature. In fact, why don't we go and explore one of the most fascinating birds that lives right in our state of NC, known as the great blue heron. The great blue heron is a large water bird found in and around North Carolina. It gets its name from its grayish-blue plumage, which is an interesting factor of this bird. This bird mainly hunts fish, and the way it hunts fish is particularly interesting. These herons lie completely still, motionless, near a lake or near shallow water, and as soon as they catch a fish or see a fish, they strike. In the blink of an eye, they spear the fish with their sharp, thick beaks. Great blue herons live in both saltwater and freshwater habitats, from coastal marshes to riverbanks. They also forage in agricultural fields, but if you want to spot one, you can always go to a lake. I found this great blue heron at Lake Crabtree. When breeding, these birds usually gather around in colonies. And an interesting thing is that these colonies are called herons, where they nurse their children and build large nests high off the ground. Not only are cormorants and herons important to me, but they're also important to the lake ecosystems they live in, since they control fish populations and make sure one fish species doesn't completely overcompete the other because of their predatory nature. And since they're so important, they should definitely be protected, even though they're generally common species right now. Who knows? With the way things are going, maybe in some years, they might be threatened. Because of human implications around NC, such as climate change, industrialization, urbanization, pollution, and all of these impacts, so many bird species are in danger. Many bird species living all over our state, from the mountains to the coast, are becoming threatened and are starting to live their lives in danger far more than they did, let's say, 100 years back. And this can be for many reasons, but we can start off with one of the big ones: climate change. Both cormorants and herons thrive in lake beds and marshes, which are some of the habitats most at risk from climate change, because they're generally wet environments. Water tends to be highly affected by an increase in climate, since sea levels rise as glaciers melt. A rise in sea levels destroy coastline habitats that so many birds thrived in before. Plovers, sandpipers, and other specialized shorebirds living in these coasts, or living in NC coast specifically, struggles to thrive in this shifting habitat. An example of this is the least tern. This is a species of gull-like bird that lives in coastal environments, as well as freshwater marshes and lakes. These birds are highly dependent on their coastal environments, in which they hunt, nest, and live on. This is why just an increase in 1.5 degrees Celsius can completely devastate their populations, since this increase in temperature can cause a rise in sea levels in the coasts that these terns nest in, which can cause the nest to be flooded. These once common species can become highly threatened or even extinct with this little increase in temperature, which could even happen with the way things are going. Just like this, so many species can be devastated by climate change. And it's not just shorebirds that are affected by climate change. Migrating birds, like geese and swifts, can have their migration patterns changed due to the rise in temperature, since the temperature is in part what tells them when to migrate. In fact, some of the birds most affected by climate change are Arctic and forest birds. According to Wake Audubon's Survival by Degrees, around 2/3 of birds in North America that are increasing at risk for extinction from global temperature rise, with just a 1.5 Celsius increase in temperature, are birds like the spruce grouse, Cassin's finch, and snowy owls, which are Arctic and forest birds. Without forest birds, seeds would have a harder time being dispersed, and forests would not grow back as fast as they normally would. This would cause a drop in species diversity in many environments, since some plants would outcompete other plants, which are not getting dispersed by birds. The single largest group impacted by us have been grassland birds. with close to 3/4 of grassland species declining since 1970, and the loss of around 7 million grassland birds since then. These grassland species are so severely impacted by climate change. Since a shift in climate means a shift in the species' ability to thrive in said environment. Many forest and grassland species end up dying due to hotter heat waves and less plants and food to thrive on. Without grassland species to spread seeds of native plants, many of these plant species die out, and invasive grasses and species begin to take over the ecosystem. Many predatory grassland birds also feed on insects, which can have a dramatic rise in population if these birds that feed on the insects die out. Although climate change is a damaging factor for these species, the largest factor for threatening our birds in NC is urbanization and habitat loss. With more people living in NC now than ever, wild areas around our state are constantly decreasing due to an increase in homes and cities being built in all corners of North Carolina.
Although many are well aware about how climate change affects organisms like birds, what people don't seem to be as knowledgeable about is the impact of urbanization on birds. As more high-rise buildings are built and more glass panes are used to make them, the more birds we effectively kill annually. This is because birds can struggle to perceive glass. If the glass is very transparent, birds are likely to assume that it is open space, and as a result, may crash into it while trying to get there. If the glass is very reflective, then it will appear as if the objects that it is reflecting are there past it. This can be dangerous in urban areas with a lot of trees and vegetation, since birds could attempt to fly through places that are reflected without realizing that it is a glass panel. Some potential solutions to glass panels are implementing additional layers on top of sections of the glass to become more recognizable to birds. Examples of these additions include shutters, grills, netting, or anything else that breaks down the glass into smaller pieces. Adding visible patterns on the glass allows the glass to be more visible to birds. This can be done in the interior of the glass or the exterior and still have similar effects. This method of bird-friendly design can reduce bird collisions by as much as 90%, according to an article by Tian Wang, an architectural journalist. Additionally, using translucent glass instead of transparent or reflective glass allows birds to identify the obstacle and avoid it. Although this may take away from the view that you get from these windows, it is an effective measure to protect birds.
The reflectivity of glass is very confusing to birds. They think it's the sky, but in cases where glass is very transparent, they think they can fly through it because it's clear. But fortunately now there are window treatments, and maybe you've researched this, companies that make windows or window treatments that can be put on to reduce the reflectivity so that birds recognize glass as a solid object and won't fly into it. So there have been advances made on that front, which are very promising.
Moreover, UV-coated glass can also be helpful, since most birds can detect this light. Although it won't work for all birds, it will still be an effective countermeasure to this problem that will not take away from the use of glass. Although all of these solutions are effective, the best solution is to limit the amount of glass that we use in the first place, since glass is not only a danger to birds, but also something that causes overheating in our buildings and thermal loss in our environment. In addition to the effects that urbanization has on birds through glass windows, habitat loss caused by urbanization can also severely impact birds. One major impact that habitat loss has on birds is the reduction of many insect populations, which, according to a study by a group of ornithologists from across North America, has cascading impacts on birds and other consumers, indicating that habitat loss could have much bigger potential impacts than we initially thought. Urbanization can also disorient birds in many ways. The presence of artificial lighting disorients birds, especially at night. This is because many birds use the night sky as a sort of map to guide themselves to their destination, but the brightness of urban lights can hinder their ability to stay on the right path and disrupt their nocturnal flight patterns. Many cities have already implemented programs to reduce the amount of light they use during the nighttime, such as the Lights Out program in Raleigh, which cuts off non-essential nighttime lighting from mid-September through the end of November. However, the amount of light pollution in general in the country is still at an alarmingly high rate, and we still need to put more effort to limit the amount of light we emit in our towns and cities.
Furthermore, the physical transformation of landscapes due to urban developments creates further challenges for birds. The development of roads, houses, and businesses in North Carolina has replaced much of the natural greenery and habitats of birds. This is especially evident when looking at the coast, as barrier islands have replaced the natural beaches and maritime forest habitat traditionally used by nesting colonial water birds. From 2017 to 2023, there has been a dramatic decrease in nests for birds such as the little blue heron, dropping from over 600 in number to around 200. This loss of habitat forces birds to seek alternative nesting sites, often in less ideal locations. The effects of less birds can be catastrophic for the surrounding environment, as scavengers such as vultures prevent the buildup of toxins and remove disease reservoirs, preventing the spread of diseases to humans and animals alike. With increased urban development comes a rise in human activity. The drastic increase of population in North Carolina leads to more disturbances from vehicles, boats, pedestrians, and unrestrained pets. These disturbances can stress birds, potentially leading to nest abandonment or reduced breeding success. As more and more birds abandon their nests, we can see the rise of insect populations in urban areas as their main predators, birds, have decreased. Although some say that this increase in insect population is positive for biodiversity and pollination, birds bring a balance to these populations, which when overturned can be detrimental. This is highlighted when looking at the locust plagues each year. The widespread increase in pest insect populations can be detrimental to agriculture and wildlife, as insects wreak havoc on crops, infest buildings, and cause decay in plants and trees. The increased human activity also contributes to another significant issue: pollution. Pollution has served as another large problem affecting our feathered friends. According to Ian Workerton, an ornithologist, North America has lost about 3 billion birds since 1970, which is a staggering 25% decline overall. This decline isn't uniform. Grasslands birds, shorebirds, sea ducks, and eastern forest birds are among the hardest hit. One of the major contributors to this decline is the buildup of contaminants in the environment. These pollutants can lead to direct harm, such as toxicity that results in death, and they also reduce the availability of food sources. For example, pesticides kill off insects that many birds depend on for nourishment.
If at all possible, don't use chemicals. Don't have your yard sprayed for mosquitoes. Don't do these things unless you absolutely have to, because you're impacting your hummingbirds, the things that you love. You're impacting them. And oh, by the way, you're also impacting the bees, the butterflies, and some of the other birds, as well as lizards and other things in your yard as well that you probably don't realize.
Additionally, pollution can degrade the quality of berries and seeds that birds consume, making it harder for them to find healthy food. Water degradation severely harms coastal birds such as the great heron, as their main source of food, fishes, are often killed due to pollutants taking up valuable oxygen. Plastic pollution poses another grave danger. Many birds mistakenly ingest plastic materials which fill their stomachs and prevent them from digesting real food, ultimately leading to their starvation. This situation highlights how pollution not only affects individual birds, but often reflects broader environmental health issues. Due to their close interaction with their habitat and sensitivity to pollutants, birds are great indicators of the ecosystem health. When bird populations decline, it suggests that their habitats are becoming less suitable due to pollution and habitat degradation. This decline can also signal problems for other species sharing the same environment. As well harms birds, often harms other wildlife as well. The impact of pollution is further compounded by the effects of ship traffic and coastal erosion. Disturbances are present from commercial ship traffic due to increase of residents, which has also caused nest failures due to overwash. In the lower Cape Fear River, ship traffic continues to cause nest failures due to overwash on islands neighboring the channel, and indirectly increases erosion of these islands according to the 2024 CWB survey report.
Coastal birds are being impacted by these storms, but they're being impacted during the breeding season in particular. Their nests may be lost to these storms, whether they're birds that nest in trees. Some of them nest in shorter trees at the coast, or if they're nesting on the ground, obviously they could get washed away. So coastal birds are definitely at the mercy of weather, which is getting more extreme, as well as human disturbance. People walking, as well as dogs, cats, raccoons that are all associated with people, are a real problem for our colonial birds at the coast. And you'll hear that from any coastal biologist. They will tell you that all of these things are really problematic.
These nest failures lead to a decline of coastal bird populations, which can have significant implications for marine life. Coastal ecosystems, including salt marshes and seagrass meadows, rely on bird guano to maintain their fertility. As bird populations decline, these habitats may have less resilient and become more susceptible to degradation, leading to reduced ecosystem services and biodiversity loss. Human structures and improperly managed waste attract predators such as coyotes, raccoons, foxes, and various bird species like crows and gulls. Domestic pets also pose a large problem. Cats have contributed to the extinction of 63 species of birds, killing around 2.4 billion birds a year, as stated in an American Bird Conservation article. This threat is so severe that the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, lists domestic cats as one of the world's worst non-native invasive species. These predators pose a significant threat to birds around North Carolina as they cause species like the black skimmers to abandon sites with established predator populations. Invasive species represent another significant challenge for bird populations in the ecosystems they inhabit, often through competition and hybridization. The introduction of non-native birds can disrupt local wildlife and plant communities in drastic ways. A study published by Valeria L. Martin Albuquerque in 2015 indicates that over 200 species of birds have become naturalized around the world, and their impacts on native ecosystems can be quite serious. One major way invasive birds affect native species is through competition for resources. These non-native birds often compete with local species for food and nesting sites, which can lead to declines in native populations. For example, some introduced species may be more aggressive or better adapted to exploit available resources, leaving less available for native birds that have evolved in these environments. Another critical concern is hybridization. When non-native birds breed with native species, it can dilute the genetic diversity of the native population. This loss of unique traits can undermine the resilience of birds, making them more vulnerable to environmental changes. Invasive birds can also introduce diseases that native species had no immunity against. This transmission can lead to significant mortality rates among bird populations, compounding their struggles for survival. Predation is another avenue through which invasive species harm birds. Some introduced bird species may prey on eggs or young chicks of ground nesting natives, dramatically impacting their populations. This predatory behavior disrupts the delicate balance of local ecosystems and can lead to cascading effects throughout the food web. Interestingly, while many native bird species have negative impacts, a few may provide some benefits, such as pollination or speed dispersal. However, these positive effects are generally far outweighed by negative consequences they bring to biodiversity and ecosystem health.
So many bird populations are already declining at an alarming rate. And in the future, this could become a much bigger problem. Since increasing temperatures, urbanization, and the slew of factors affecting birds can contribute to threatening many species. But why? Why do we need to care about birds so much? At times, it may look like the only thing birds do is fly around, sing, and look pretty. But the fact is that birds are far more important than you may have thought. Birds are essential for plant growth around NC. Hummingbirds help pollinate the plants we grow and the native plants in our ecosystems. Birds eat the fruit and seeds that help spread plants to new locations and help forests grow. Birds keep different plant populations in check by eating them, allowing for more species diversity in our ecosystems. And without these kinds of birds, our forests would just be smaller, less diverse. Like all organisms, birds are deeply intertwined with other life forms on our planet in a web. Birds can hold a variety of different roles in this web, since they're such a diverse group of animals. Sparrows can be predators and control insect populations in this web, but could also be prey to foxes, wildcats, and other predatory species. Eagles can be important apex predators of the environment, controlling small and medium-sized mammal populations, and herons and cormorants can keep large fish populations stable, so that smaller fish have a chance to thrive. I could keep on listing birds and how they impact this web, but that list would go on for a long time. If we let bird populations continue to decline in NC, rabbits could reproduce out of control with a lack of raptors. Pest insects would rise in number with a lack of natural predators, and large predatory fish would consume huge amounts of prey fish since they would have no water birds to hunt them. There are direct examples of this type of ecological imbalance from past mistakes made by governments. In India, a drug known as diclofenac was used as an anti-inflammatory medication in cattle. This drug was widely used in these cattle and remained in the animal's body even after death. After the passing of the livestock, vultures would come to feast on the carcass. Since the body of the cow had accumulated diclofenac in its tissue, the vultures would inherently consume the drug. The issue is that vultures are actually unable to break down this drug, which actually led them to death. It led to a huge die-off, and it was so catastrophic that it led to a 98% decrease in white rump vulture population, 95% decrease in Indian vulture populations, and a 91% decrease in red-headed vulture population. This is just an astounding statistic to me, because over 90% of the population of some of the most populous species in India since 2002 had decreased, just like that. This is all according to the BBC. This decline not only hurt the ecosystem by removing a vital scavenger, but also indirectly led to the deaths of around 500,000 people due to the spread of disease like rabies from the rotting carcasses. Since without vultures, the new scavengers became dogs and rats, which spread disease. Now with an understanding of the importance of birds in our environment, we as people living in NC could help improve the situation for birds that live here with us through a variety of ways. We can reduce our carbon footprint by using less plastics and wasting less water and electricity in our households. We can also reduce pollution by reducing the use of plastics and by buying pesticide-free crops. One of the biggest dangers to birds that we as normal citizens can mitigate are window collisions. During migration months, we can turn off lights in our homes and buildings to help birds navigate their migrations properly. And we could put stickers or blinds on our windows to prevent fatal collisions. We can also keep our cats indoors to prevent them from killing our local birds, and we can grow native plants to give birds more opportunities to eat. Though many issues can be tackled by making these small changes to our lives, many large-scale changes are things that we as individuals cannot directly impact. This is why I urge you watching to advocate for birds, spread awareness on issues that they face in our communities, and try to include these little steps in your daily lives. Since if we work collectively, we can significantly impact the birds in our state, and inherently the people that live here too. To anyone listening that has the chance to directly impact policy, we urge you to bring up these topics about birds during meetings, to speak about the environmental relevance of birds, and to influence policymaking in NC to help bird populations. We must bring forth new policies on climate change by influencing the creation of new climate bills. We need to increase regulations on pesticides and create a more bird-friendly infrastructure in our area. We need statewide policy on these sorts of issues to have the biggest benefit to bird populations. With the combined help of different people in NC, we can help rebound the already damaged bird population and help further prevent the destruction to our environment and help preserve the beautiful birds that sing to us every morning. Thank you.